Hey friends, thanks for joining me, Jim Barrood, to hear a few insights from leaders who represent our innovation ecosystem. Today's chat is with Tom Szaky, the founder and CEO of TerraCycle, an international leader in recycling, recycled content, and reuse. All right, so Tom, tell us, you can start in high school or college, because both of those are good starting points.
Yeah. So I'll give you guys like the accelerated version of the past. I've been running TerraCycle for 25 years. I've always loved entrepreneurship from a very young age. Started my first company, it was like, web design, nothing super special, but back when I was 14. Ended up coming down here for college, went to Princeton, and for me, maybe one of the most pivotal turning points from a love of entrepreneurship to really thinking about purposeful entrepreneurship, which is what TerraCycle has been very much about. I remember very clearly one of the first classes I took here was Intro to Econ. Professor gets up on stage and asks, what's the purpose of business? Very appropriate sort of opening question for an opening class like that. And the answer she was looking for was maximize profit to shareholders. And it felt a little incomplete, sort of bothered me a little bit. And where I ended up thinking about this for a while, where I ended up landing, at least it's been sort of my philosophy, has been profit is critically important, right? Without it, we're dead. And with it, we flourish and have longevity. So it's critically important, but it's more an indicator of health, right? Just like health is critically important. If we're not healthy, we're not here. And if we are, we, can make, have an effect, do things. But maybe if you frame it that way, it leaves room for what I view as the purpose for how does a business benefit as many stakeholders as absolutely possible. One of which, of course, are shareholders, but it's not the only one. And so I had this idea sort of floating in my head. For me, TerraCycle has been really a manifestation of a lifelong sort of interest in the topic of waste. And I'm really interested in garbage as a topic because it is it's highly purposeful to solve, right? So it's something that solutions to it, are great. It's something that we all need, and all those, the plants, animals, everyone needs it. But the fascination part beyond its purpose is that it's filled with all these crazy anomalies, right? For example, right? Garbage is the only material in the world that we are willing to pay to get rid of. And in fact, that's the legal definition of garbage in some countries. Like in Japan, that is the legal, when is this garbage, right? I was actually on with a German lawyer just because we're dealing with this in our German division. At what point is this not a product? When is it waste? And then, because the moment it becomes waste, it's governed by different rules, right? You can ship it differently, you can do things with it differently versus when it's a product. Now this is mine, I bought this, right? I can own this, cherish it for a very long time. I could give it to you, you could enjoy it. In some countries, it's only waste if I'm willing to pay you to remove it from me, right? Or, isn't it interesting that everything we possess will be property of a garbage company, 99% of which within the year of purchase. But everything will one day be legal property of a garbage business. For how big that is of a concept, isn't it wild that garbage is also the least innovative industry per dollar of revenue? And it goes on with all this weirdness in it because it's not a natural concept. So that was the spark. And everything we've done, and I'll just give you a little tour visually in a quick moment just to give you a sense of what this all looks like, has been thinking about how to use business to solve for waste. To give you a sense of the maybe the journey, I'll do it that way, but because I can't see my slides on the screen, I'm going to have to do it in a not as beautiful view. Maybe here's a good way to, we'll do it here. So maybe today, TerraCycle, what are we 25 years later? We're a global waste management company. We're just under 500 employees, about 100 million in revenue. We operate in 20 countries. We're headquartered in Trenton, New Jersey. But a chunk of our staff there, a chunk spread out across the US in different locations. And then, this is where our geography is today. Everything we try to do has sort of two major theses to it. One is it's about elevating waste up the waste hierarchy. So the waste hierarchy, if you think about circular economy, starts at the very bottom, which is this idea of a linear economy where we make waste, and the very worst way to waste would be littering. Better than littering is put all the litter in a pile, that's a landfill. Better than landfilling is to burn that, maybe get some caloric value or energy value. Then better than that would be recycling. Better than that would be, say, upcycling. Better than that would be reuse, and that's the sort of how you elevate up the hierarchy. So the types of things that we do to do that, at the very bottom here you'll see eliminate informal disposal. in many countries around the world, especially emerging countries, like this is in Bangkok, 30% or so of the waste generated ends up as informal disposal, which is just really a fancy word for litter. So one example project, and that's the only thing we run as a public charity. So we can also, if you guys are interested, talk about how do you deal with purposeful entrepreneurship from a nonprofit context or a for-profit context, because we are both. We are a thriving for-profit, but we also do some work as a 501c3. So that work is done, as you can sort of see pictured here, we run Bangkok's biggest river cleanup apparatus. So a lot of the waste, in the city will get washed out, during the monsoon season, end up in canals, rivers, and the ocean, and we try to clean up as much as we can and capture it. Above that, we have our recycling division, where the goal is that we collect and recycle those objects that are not locally recyclable. So we are the world's largest coffee capsule recycler, or largest cosmetic recycler, or everything from laboratory consumables like centrifuge tubes to bicycle helmets, and like truly everything in between, about half B2C, half B2B. And if you Google TerraCycle, that's what that brand is very much known for. And that could look like, here I'll have some better visuals for you guys, but that could look like, cigarette recycling in over 1,000 cities. I think that's Vancouver. It could look like flexible film recycling. This would be like outside ShopRites. It could be guitar string recycling, flip-flop recycling, cosmetic recycling. I think that's in France. Toy recycling, that's in Australia. Cosmetics, dirty diapers, that's in Holland. Credit card recycling in the UK. Blister packs. I mean, you name it. Just goes on and on and on. Then above that, what we think about is, it's not just about how do we collect and recycle things, and truly, like anything from, advanced filtration devices with Cytiva or halogen tubes, one of the world's biggest lamp recyclers in the US, is one of our facilities in Chicago, all the way to then how do we help make things from waste. So it could be fun comedic things, like this, all the way to frisbees from dog food bags, bicycles from Unilever deodorant containers. This is exercise parks made from Nike shoes in Korea, all the way to playgrounds from toys, to really fun things. Like we built every Olympic podium since the Tokyo Olympics. This was out of, we were cleaning up the rivers to get ready for the Paris Games, and that's the waste was made into the Olympic podiums, all the way to some really fun technical stuff. This is, for example, the world's first pen from use pens. That's in Japan. Or this is ASICS' first shoe made from itself. So our role here is we collect the shoes, we deconstruct them, we reformulate them into a new material that then ASICS can just take and plug and play right into its production and make new shoes. And then, from there, about 10 years ago, we started thinking, what's beyond recycling, right? Because if I recycle something, if you take an object like this, I would really argue it's made from three things. It's made from this particular one, plastic, so the material it's made from. Let's call that its composition. But this plastic is not just a pile of plastic in my hand, it's formed as a cup, which also costs money, by the way, to form it. That's its form. But it's also more than just plastic in a form, it's an idea. That also costs someone money. You have to invest in someone coming up with the idea. The idea of this is to hold a cold beverage, right? If it was scalding hot, my fingers would get too hot, right? It's for a specific thing. And when we recycle, we only recover the composition of something. But if we upcycle, which is pretty limited, that's like that jacket I showed you, that's like made from chip bags. There we're recovering everything but the intention. But even better than that is just clean this and use it again. That would be where reuse comes in. And so 10 years ago, we started really thinking about reuse much, much more. And that's sort of like the most forward thing we do is we developed a platform called, I'll just show it to you. Sorry, it's not going to be as beautiful as me putting up the slide formally, called Loop. And basically we work with hundreds of CPG companies who've created packaging. This is Nestle, or that's P&G, through our platform, where you can now, that's Clorox wipes, that's Cascade, dish soap, all brands you probably know. Been very interesting as a ride. We launched it, this was in Davos in 2019 with the CEOs. It was actually a really interesting press conference because you have the head of Greenpeace, you can't see it here, on stage with the CEO of P&G, Pepsi, and we were all together announcing this thing. And just the day before, Greenpeace had done an attack on P&G. So it's like getting this all to be organized and happen in that moment was quite something. But we ended up launching pilots all over the world on Loop. It's if you guys are interested in that, we can get into more detail. That's why I'm trying to go quick, so your questions can really fuel where we take our dialogue today. But very sort of, fascinating experience with launching pilots in Canada, the US, Japan, the UK, France. Very, very challenging, but where we landed is we now run France's biggest reuse system. So it struggled here. We couldn't get it to work here. If that's interesting, I can explain why. But today in France, across most major retailers, you can go in to a supermarket and it would, on shelf, hundreds and hundreds of products look like this. These are all fully reusable, like Nutella to whatever, whiskey. Over 400 products, where when you buy them, you just pay a deposit. So if you buy that Nutella, you pay whatever, 20 cents. Or if you buy the Oasis, maybe 5, whatever the deposit is. Then when you're done, dirty, no sorting or anything, you can throw it into one of our bins at any store. You get your money back. Then the packaging is sorted, cleaned, and goes right back to the manufacturer who refills it, right back on shelf. And there is no garbage whatsoever. And this is how propane tanks run here. It's how beer runs in Canada. If anyone's of a certain vintage, that was the past, right? But this is like, how do we modernize that and make it work in today's mass market environment? That disappeared in almost everywhere in the world. And even in Ontario, Canada, they're canceling the reuse beer system very soon. So that's where we are now. That's sort of like our future, if you will, and where things go. But that hopefully gives you sort of a whistle-stop tour from of what we do today. And it's all around this idea of how do we elevate waste, move it up the hierarchy, and try to only do what traditional garbage companies do not do. Right? We try to fill that gap, and that's where we try to play. We don't do things that where there's lots of other offerings available because they're already there, and people can choose those.
So let's just build on the Loop experience, because that's sort of fascinating.
Yeah.
I remember when you first launched that, I asked you to bring me to Davos with you. With you.
There you go.
You did not.
Sorry. You were invited. I just let me turn that on.
So it's subsidized by France. I mean, I don't want to go. You don't have to go through the reason it didn't work other places. But what is the?
Well, it'd be interesting. You want to hear why it didn't work?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So. Let me maybe give you pitch version 1, how we pitched it at the beginning. And I'll contrast that to how we do it now, because it's a huge foundational learning. And the essence of this, why I'm excited to share it with you, like the journey of the challenge, is the biggest lesson I've learned in purposeful entrepreneurship. And what I mean by that is when you're trying, whether you're internal to an organization and you're trying to make it better, you want this building to put solar panels up. You want everything to be as forward thinking, only have vegan food, come up with whatever version that is for you, If you want an organization to be purposeful, you could do that internally, or like what I do as an external, come in and try to influence. And generally speaking, the starting point on doing that is saying, like, let's take diaper recycling as a simple example. Diapers make up 3% of landfills. So one way you can go into a diaper company, and that's usually the starting point for a social entrepreneur, is to say, hell, Pampers Huggies, 3% of your production ends up as, 3% of landfills are your product. I finally figured out how to collect them. I finally figured out how to recycle them. Can you now fund solving this externality? And that's not how the chess piece moves, right? So if you go in with that type of approach, at most you're going to get, if you find a really cool person in the organization, you're going to get a symbolic amount of funding for a very short period of time. And that's all it'll be. But if you really empathize with how the chess piece moves, what I mean is, what is the goal of the org? What's the goal of Huggies? Is to increase its market share. Do more revenue with less work. That's how water flows in businesses, right? I want to make more money, revenue, and do less work, meaning more profitability. And that's how every decision flows. So if you instead go in and say, wait a minute, I can launch diaper recycling and by doing so increase your market share, suddenly you can unlock and make these programs huge and long lasting and so on. Like that diaper bin I showed you, that's how it does it. You can put in any branded diaper, it'll weigh it for you and send you coupons into, in that example, Pampers, and that market share shift funds the cost of diaper recycling. And everyone wants to do the right thing instead of benign things like a TV commercial, and suddenly that's live in 3 countries. So, backdrop to Loop. Let me give you the way we pitched at the beginning. Let me go. The major insight at the beginning, these are actually the original slides, was this. Oh, sorry, let me start here. Okay. Back up until garbage, that's another weird anomaly, was invented in the 50s. I want to be super clear. Garbage is a 75-year-old idea, okay? Because only two things happened in the 1950s that really begot waste. One is the things around us. Imagine if we were in this room right now, in 1940. The chair we would be sitting on would be made from wood, some metal pieces. Our clothing would be like cotton, wool, maybe silk. And if we were eating food, which we are here, it would be, certainly on its own package, like an apple with a peel or something like that. Or if it was milk, it would have come from a milkman. All those things are things that you can throw into nature, and nature has systems for it, right? It would thank you. It would be nutrients for the forest. Now take that exact same thing now, 75 years later. The chair we're sitting on is all advanced materials, right? Like this is something nature doesn't have systems for. Look at all the way our food came, all in materials that are advanced and amazing, but nature has no systems for, and 60% of our clothing is polymer. It's either embedded or it's like nylons and whatnot. That came into the 1950s, and the other thing that really changed is disposability came onto the scene. So back in the milk mandate, it wasn't just milk, it was also like motor oil and many things. Came in reusable packaging, and the packaging was an asset to the manufacturer, meaning that they were financially motivated, the milk company, to make that thing go around as many times as possible, because the more times it went around, the more you could depreciate the cost of that bottle over the uses. And if it broke, whose problem was it? The milk company. That's why you can still buy these at flea markets today, 70 years later. 1950s rolls around, by the way, and this is a positive photo from the 1950s, celebrating the virtue of disposability, which is convenience, and you don't have to wash the dishes, you can throw them away. But a strange thing happens. The package becomes a cost of goods sold to the manufacturer. And think about all the packaging on the table right now. That's all your property, right? Like you own that Sprite container, right? Like you didn't just get the juice, you got the aluminum, like double win, right? But do you want that now that it's empty, right? I presume you don't. And that is really a weird thing, that we own this stuff and we don't want it. And what's the big megatrend that gets created is the goal of the manufacturers to keep making the investment in that as low as possible. So is birthed the biggest megatrend, lightweighting, and that actually makes things less recyclable, like constantly, because recycling is just urban mining. So we went to manufacturers and said, wait, if we go back to the way it was, you can move from a cost of goods sold on your package to an asset, and that would allow you to make the most unbelievable product designs you could possibly imagine, because instead of having to design them for one use from a cost basis, you can design them for many uses. And that's how we got 200 massive CPG companies, and look at how gorgeous these are. I mean, isn't that the nicest bottle of Tide you have ever seen in your life? Or Clorox, or Cascade, or Haagen-Dazs? I mean, these are like museum quality things. And we got all these companies to join, like off we go, right? That's why it ended up, launching at Davos, became the #1 sustainability story in 2019 worldwide, like really big, blast. And what was really fascinating is then we said to retailers, let's now launch this. And luckily we put lots of chips on the roulette table. We said, let's try, in each major region we're in, at least 1 or 2 markets, hence Canada, US, UK, France, and Japan. And we went to the retailers, I remember this right, okay, and they said, wait, let's make sure that our customer actually cares about this offering. So we solved that by launching e-com platforms for everyone. So you can see it's like in the Walmart look and feel, or the Loblaw look and feel, or the Aeon in Japan look and feel. We launched e-com stores where people could buy these reusable packages, and we'd ship it to them, pick up the empties, wash them, get them around, and so on. And it worked great. All the health and safety, which is a huge lift. Imagine like baby food, you don't know if once this has gone, like if you took it, I don't know what you put into this. I have to assume the most horrible things that you've done to it, and I got to clean that in a way that I can fill it with, say, baby food and sell it to the next mom, right? And have Nestle or Danone be comfortable with that, right? So all the health and safety protocols and everything we were able to solve. And then these guys went into in-store pilots that looked like this. Same concept, but now they're doing their thing, And this is like, that's Fred Meyer, or in Tokyo, or that's London with Tesco. And this was the very interesting moment where we then, because by this point in time, we have invested maybe $50 million into Loop. It's a huge investment for us. And, these pilots cost us money. And so we started telling the retailers, look, there's no more learning. It's the same everywhere. It's functioning. People like it. It's the same data in every country. Like, there's no more learning. Let's start scaling. And we got back from like all these companies saying, no, We don't want to scale till we are forced to by regulation. That's to your question on regs. And we forgot how the chess piece moves. Even me who lectures about knowing how the chess piece moves, we forgot, because why do brands not want to do reuse? It's not because they're like evil or anything. It's because if a manufacturer's primary goal is to make more money tomorrow and do less work tomorrow, right? Higher revenue, higher profitability, reuse has a big problem. Because even if we make in these beautiful packages, you're not going to buy 2 ice creams. You're just going to buy that same ice cream now in reusable, but you're not going to increase your volume of ice cream consumption. And so what's the essence there? If you're a shampoo company, what do you really want to do is invent conditioner. And then when you've convinced people to use conditioner, then you want to invent treatment. And then when you've gotten that solved and everyone's doing step 1, 2, 3, you want to figure out what the hell the 4th stupid thing you put in your hair. And that's how you grow basket size. Your laundry detergent, you want to invent fabric softener and then fabric scent, right? Think every category this has happened, right? You are toothpaste, you want to invent mouthwash. I can keep doing this, right? Like always these extra things. That's what is easy way to grow incrementality. And reuse has no incrementality, but it has extra work. At minimum, even if we simplify it, you have to be aware that that used package went out in the universe. And who knows what they put in the bottle, and has to come back in a way that it passes at least a health and safety standard. And so every retailer everywhere in the world said, hey, we'll keep learning, we'll do 10 stores, but we're not going to really scale until we're forced. And that's where France was different. France has the laws that are forcing reuse and subsidizing reuse. And that was a huge breakthrough for us in France. But we also, as well, learned, the question was not just relying on regulation. It wasn't just, hey, we're going to sit back and wait for regulation to occur. We thought a lot about, okay, if that's the truth, how do we solve this without being dependent on regulation? Because if we're only dependent on regulation, we're only going to make it work in France, where the regulation is there. And look at this environment in the US. We're far from any form of good regulation. In fact, all good regulation is out the window, and more of it every day, right? So how do we make that work? And we realized that if the chess piece moves always in this way, and we're not going to be incremental, we have to be zero work. Absolutely no work. And the way we solved that, we realized, after really carefully thinking about this, I want to try to make sure I find you the right slide, because yes, is that if you this is why for us understanding theory has always been really important, because then you can take bigger steps back. We said if you stack all packaging forms on a chart like this, and the spectrum is here the most expensive per kilo or liter, that's like a perfume bottle, a liquor bottle, expensive wine bottle, heavy laundry detergent bottle, and then over here the cheapest way to package things, the way that potato is packaged. There's no silver bullet. It's not like reuse is going to work everywhere. But in this bottom area, which is about 1/3 of what's in the supermarket shelf, the packaging doesn't have to change at all. A wine bottle is way over designed for 1 liter of juice, right? I mean, come on. It should be in a pouch if it's going to only ever serve 1 liter of content and then be thrown away. Like your whiskey bottle, your hot sauce container, your jar for pickles, all this stuff, perfume container is way over designed to only be used for 1 fill. And it turns out in those bottom packages, you can enable reuse with next to no change, right, at all. And when you don't change it, suddenly all the reasons that people didn't want to scale it evaporate. It completely goes away. And it turns out the reusable package becomes more profitable than the disposable one, because you are trading the cost of collection and cleaning for the cost of making the new thing. And in those expensive packages, it's actually cheaper to move to reuse. And it was so interesting because the more then we empathized on not getting angry that people don't want to do what we felt is the right thing and further sustainability, but understanding how does the water flow in the organization, and then matching that has become for us the biggest unlock in this overall journey. And it was a big, very expensive, winding road, but now, a bunch of retailers in the UK have signed. You're going to see more progress of this launched throughout Europe and the UK, and then, slowly, hopefully come to this side.
It's amazing. And is there a certain time period where they get to a threshold where it becomes break even or profitable?
Oh, yeah, you want to see this, there's a magic to this question. So, and then this is what it looks like left. You see what I mean? So it's not like a new fancy bottle anymore. Everything you see looks very normal. That's baby food. Looks very normal. These are now fully reusable versions of those things. But look at how traditional they look, right? It's the exact same pack. So now to answer your question, the really fun part in this is that if you think about a disposable package is just the cost of that pack. Let's just say this is a 30-cent package. So it's the 30 cents every time you sell, what is this? 750 milliliters of gin, right? The reusable is a bit more complex, right? You have to look at what the return rate is, and I'll answer this for you if it's a low return rate and a high return rate. So at the beginning, like what's cool now is, we just did a bunch of liquor launches a few weeks ago in France, and the liquors that launched have just upgraded their current bottle to now be reusable, meaning that the only version available on shelf of brands like Campari and Ricard and these sort of French liquors is only the reusable version, right? At the beginning, your return rates are going to be low, which means you're not going to have a lot of sorting and washing cost, but if you set the deposit at something more than the cost of the acquisition of the bottle, you're going to have a lot of what I call profit on deposit loss, right? So if you have low adaptation of reuse, the bottle becomes very profitable because you don't have to return the deposits to the consumer. Then as the system gets bigger and gets to maturity, your profit on deposit loss goes down to close to nothing because the bottles are all turning, but then your cost of washing and cleaning is at such scale that it's cheaper than buying new glass. So in every derivative between starting point and end point, so no returns to full returns, it's always cheaper than the disposable version. But that only works if you keep the bottle exactly what it was before. And that sort of was the big breakthrough on this. And then it doesn't need subsidy anymore.
Good.
Yeah.
I just want to look at the questions in a sec. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. But as mentioned, you raised some money recently.
Yes.
So
Yes.
tell us how the company has evolved and
Yeah.
what's going on with that
Yeah.
raise
Yeah.
and what are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone through sort of 3 phases of capital raising, and I think the third phase will be the most interesting to the group, but just to give you context. The first phase, in our first 10 years, which got us from zero, or from losses to profitability, that's what that really is accentuated by, was traditional, what you call Reg D financing, where you have to go after accredited investors if they're individuals, basically rich people, which I think is, like some minimum net worth or minimum yearly income. I think it's like a million a year income or some basically rich people. The concept there is that they can withstand the loss if they make the bet and lose, right? But that means that most Americans can't invest in Reg D, and then you can go after venture capital, private equity, family offices, right? And that's what we did at the beginning as a dorm room startup. For our first 10 years, we did a number of rounds and reached profitability. Then the next 10 years was more strategic partnership type investments. We're in 20 countries. And garbage companies are very fragmented. There's no big global company. So Waste Connections, the biggest garbage company in Canada, bought 20% of our Canadian company. Or Itochu, a big conglomerate in Japan, bought a part of our Japanese company. This brought in investment into our subsidiaries, which is a great way to bring in capital, but it's limited on how much of that you can do. And then we're 25 years old, so we're in the next phase. And we've been doing this for 5 years, where 4 or 5 years ago, we first did this. And it was sort of like, this Wild West. It's called Reg A investment, and it's a uniquely American construct through the Jobs Act, where you can crowdfund for equity, like take any investor, so it doesn't have to be accredited, but in exchange for being able to take from the general public, you have to file with the SEC, as if you were a public company. The only difference is you file twice a year instead of 4 times a year. But it's the same filings. Like you could go to Edgar and download our financials for the past 5 years, and there's some, you have to probably assume, at least $500,000 of cost to get through the process, and then at least $250,000 a year to do that type of reporting. But then you can take money from the public, like through a crowdfunding mechanism. And so we did that for the first time in 2018 to 20, so just about 5 years ago, and we raised just under 20 million. And it was great. Everyone did well on that. We got in capital. We were able to do some acquisitions. We've done 4 acquisitions so far, and we can also talk about M&A theory if that's of interest to folks. And if you invested in that round, you would have already been paid back about 25 cents of every dollar you put in dividends, because we've been paying dividends every year. And your equity value, would have increased as well. So it's not like a like a startup where you put in money and you don't see anything until the potential liquidity event, there is this nice sort of dividend process that we've done. Now, mind you, we're, I think, the only Reg A company that's paid dividends every year. So it's not common in that space, but it's something that we really focused on. And then last year, we said, let's do this again. So we did a $5 million round. That became the #1 crowdfunding in the US last year. Did really well. So we've opened up a $75 million round that we're in the middle of, and that's going quite well. So if you, not here soliciting investment, but if you want to see what that looks like and what we share and what the filings are, it's invest.terracycle.com. You can go there and just see what it's all about and look at it. It's a really great way to raise capital, because today, if you're out there capital raising, venture is horrible. It sucks. Like, there is money out there, but it is not playing. It's not investing. It's really the driest I've seen for money flow in 25 years of being involved in like startups and so on. And if you're in sustainability, it's a double headwind, because there's a lot of headwind on sustainability as a topic right now. So if it's like venture sustainability, that's a tough combo today. But this whole Reg A environment has been phenomenal. And what's also interesting about it is that when you do the traditional Reg D type investment, when you go pitch investors, you're going on a roadshow. You're out there, you're pitching investors, you're in these types of meetings, doing PowerPoints and convincing investors to invest. And then you might also have lots of discussions on the terms, right? The bigger the investor and the more hungry or the more you need it, the more they're gonna mess with you with terms and do all sorts of weird bells and whistles that'll really bite you in the butt later when it comes to payday, right? The Reg A is different. You never talk to investors. You promote it through advertising, right? What I look at with my team every day is not how they did on the roadshow, but what is the ROAS, the return on advertising spend. We do ads on, Google and Meta and all these places, which promote the brand, drives our own business, and then brings in these retail investors. It also allows your team, like your compliance team, HR, legal, or not HR, but like legal, finance, to warm up to public reporting, because they have to report to the SEC. So that's a hop, skip, and a jump to an IPO, much easier than going from no reporting to a public offer. So it does that as well, and it gets you a good sense of what the retail appetite is. So for me, it's been a phenomenal thing. And if you're raising capital, not if you're very early stage, but if you're mid, it's a really interesting thing to look at, I would say.
Well, and also, this is a testament to your leadership, but also because it's a brand that people can relate to, they use.
Yes.
It's got purpose.
Yes.
It's good for the environment.
Yeah.
Right? And those factors also contribute to that.
I think you asked the question, like, how do you raise capital for a thing like this? And what has been our truth all the way through is that our promise to our investors is it's two birds with one stone. It fulfills the same thing as if you donated to a nonprofit, but you also are going to get fiscal returns. That's why for us, maintaining profitability is paramount. It's why we really ensure we can pay dividends every year, because that's the demonstration of profitability. You know what I mean? And that is there while everything we do is purpose driven. So it's it brings those two things together, and you get that double benefit. It's sort of like an NGO donation and an investment wrapped together.
Got it.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about what you're going to do with that money.
Yes, sure.
You talked about M&A.
Yeah.
And then we'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. We're profitable, so it's not about plugging losses, right? That's traditionally what you would do when you raise capital, is fund losses till you're profitable. For us, it's all about growth, because we're at the point, it's 25 years. So if you're in my shoes, you want to now be looking at how do you take the company public or sell it. For us, we think the public market is probably our path, and so that's what we're thinking about a lot. And then the question is, what does the public market want, right? And it wants growth, but since maybe the past 5 years, it also wants quality P&Ls. Before 5 years, man, all that mattered was growth, and no one looked at the profitability, which is insane. But today, it corrected, I think rightly so, where like your fundamentals really matter, right? You have to be profitable and then grow. And so the primary use of the money is about 80% is into M&As, and I'll tell you our M&A strategy in a minute, so buying companies. And then 20% is into internal investments. How can we accelerate this or accelerate that? And M&A is really interesting because, like you mentioned, that your family business is 3 generations. Yep. And that's, by the way, incredible that it's passed so many generations. You know what doesn't pass generations is garbage companies. No, because that's another anomaly of garbage. It is literally shitty, nasty, gross. I mean, in the flesh. It's no metaphor needed, it's literally that. And so the kids don't want it. And so we look for high quality, which we define as a company that's been profitable for a long time, stable or growing, demonstrated profitability for 10, 20 years, so really, high quality, and is doing something in specialty recycling that takes a long time to get into, requiring a lot of permits. So things that have attracted us have been in the regulated waste space. So think, halogen tube recycling, e-waste recycling, batteries, all this sort of stuff. We've done, so our strategy is we buy a company, say for about 5 times EBITDA, somewhere there. The moment we bring them in, we can, with operational efficiencies, get that to a 4, maybe 3.5. The last one we did is 3.2. And then these companies who might have only been selling one type of waste service, let's say they've been selling battery recycling, they can now go into the place they sold battery recycling to and be like, do you want recycling for 500 other waste streams? Do you want to see, and look, remember, everything becomes waste, right? Do you want to recycle your carpet? Do you want to recycle your tables? Do you want to recycle, anywhere you look, every object here is going to be garbage, right? And that grows their top line, and that allows us to, get our money back in 2-3 years, which is a pretty good, return. And that's sort of the, what we're doing. And it's nice. We focus on these specialty ones because starting in that would require years of permits, and so we can really accelerate that that overall process.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you for that. And before we open up, what was your first product?
Oh, I didn't mention that. Yeah. So I'm going to show it to you because it's not in this presentation. Bear with me. Let me just pull up a different document for you guys so you can see it. But the way we began, so I remember I told you the story goes, this was like this thing about the role of profit, right? The story from Econ 101. And that, so my fall break freshman year, I'm originally from Hungary, but then grew up in Canada. So my friends and I went up to Toronto. And by the way, this is not like today where you could buy pot on every corner. So, my friends were growing some plants in their basement in Montreal. They were going to McGill. I'm the guy in the white hat there. And suddenly, they were doing phenomenally well growing these plants. And I asked my friend, how did you do it? And he said, I took organic waste. It's actually the Princeton cafeteria dining hall waste, which we had the pleasure of dealing with for years. And he was feeding that to worms. And the light bulb for me, that was my first fascination with garbage, was wait a minute, you can get paid for your input, then you can get paid for your output. That's pretty cool. Usually, you have negative raw material costs. So we went to, I came back very inspired. The bug of being fascinated around garbage had, got me. And convinced the dining halls to give us their food waste, which is real pleasant, and built a machine that, this was at the bottom of the campus that we installed it, which you take the organic waste, put it into that sort of composting drum. Then this was a machine that we created where it's a conveyor belt for worms. Imagine the conveyor belts go outward while the worms move out of their poop into food, like anyone would, right? And they sort of stay in the middle if you time it right, and then the worm poop comes off, and we literally packaged it in used soda bottles. So liquid worm poop in a used soda bottle, and that we then sold to like Walmart and Home Depot and those sort of places. And that was TerraCycle's first 5 years, or from 0 to 5 million. And in fact, the TerraCycle logo I drew as a worm. That's what it is. And the word TerraCycle, earth cycle, right? It's worm poop. The reason we moved out of that to recycling is we realized that as a consumer product company, your business hero is the product. And you're going to make the very best product you can. And even if you make the rule it must be garbage, you're still going to be selective. So we found ourselves taking organic waste from some places but not other places, because what you feed the worms creates different poop, right? If you eat different food, you get different poop. Even the bottles, even if they were used, we weren't taking crushed soda bottles that may have come out of a recycling facility. We had to have schools start collecting them, because if they had, like if you take that Pure Leaf bottle and, step on it, it's not going to look as good, right? And it won't look good on shelf. So we realized we had to shift over to make garbage the hero, and that's where we are today, right? And we stopped the worm poop thing, but that's how it began. Very humble roots,
And is that not sold anymore at all? Okay.
No. 5 years ago, it took us 1 to 2 years to do a full transition. Okay. That was very much like a metamorphosis. Imagine you're a worm poop manufacturing company, and you're trying to wake up as a recycling company, and you have to do all that without revenue going down. Right?
Wow.
So on the top, you'd have never noticed, but we completely morphed as an organization.
It's incredible.
Yes.
It's really incredible. Okay, we're going to take questions, so let's keep say it loudly and short question, and so we can get as many questions in as possible. Go ahead.
I had 1,000 different questions, but you said you wanted to go IPO.
Yes.
And one of my few things in life, like startup took an IPO, and it's the one thing I would never wish on someone unless you're a cash. Like having your 25 years of stewardship, whatever you want, like all of a sudden everything is like 90 days. And I remember like it almost killed, well, it kind of did kill our company.
Yeah.
Right? It's an interesting, I was just curious why.
It's a great question.
Yeah. I'm no big Wall Street guy, but went through that and it just crushed us because you've big thoughts. You seem very well read. You have a microscope, and it's a shitty lifestyle being a public company. I was just curious why you're picking.
No, it's an excellent question. I'll tell you. Because I've been advised in similar fashions, right? So if you're thinking like on my end, like what does an exit look like? This is not a family business, this is, we've raised money where we owe returns to our investors. Like that's the deal we, signed up for. And so I have two paths that are in front of me. One for an exit is a sale, and the other is going public. Those are generally two paths. So both are available. It's not like, one or the other. What fascinates me about the IPO space is that if you look at the past number of IPOs that have been true sustainability, not like a company that now has a sustainability strategy, right? Where it's like, but it's like in its DNA, all it does is sustainability. The response from the investors has been phenomenal. When Beyond Meat went public, they were about our size when they went public. They were 88 million in revenue, 30 million in loss. Now, mind you, we're profitable, but same revenue. 12 billion market cap for like many years. And I could list off 10 more that did exactly that. Now, all of these have corrected. Beyond Meat is now 1% of its original market share, but that's because it never made money in its life. For every $1 of revenue, it had $1 of loss, more or less. And that's why, we've held on to the fundamentals. We also have been reporting to the SEC, twice a year for a while, so we're very comfortable with that. And that is still what we are sort of marching towards. And we don't really have seasonality in our business, so our quarters look the same. It's pretty predictable. We're pretty comfortable there. But I think there is such an appetite from investors looking for true, like pure sustainability plays, that we think there could be something very special there, on the other end. That's at least the theory,
Yeah, because it's just I've never had like a warm-hearted discussion like that's been 20 years, but you do get all that money, but it does change yourself quarter by quarter. And with being acquired, like I've acquired companies, I've been acquired a couple times, and I've coordinated all that. And you subsume yourself into something, but it's usually there's a stability of you already have the corporate structure that's used at a quarter by quarter.
And look, and that would be fine too. We're very flexible, right? But I think like one is sort of opportunistic, like when you're ready to do it. We haven't been acquired, but we've done acquisitions, so we're very comfortable with that process and so on. On the other side, it's sort of like something that you have to sort of keep getting ready for. So we're continuing to do that, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
I love how excited you are and knowledgeable about treasure. I really didn't know what to expect. This is like you're very compelling considering your.
Next question.
So 2 questions.
Please.
So I watched your CNN.
Yes.
2010, I think. Possible.
Right?
Yeah. Since then, I've been following you.
Nice.
I've seen your one of the
very
videos.
Cool. Yeah.
So I'm following you, and I applied for a job just to come and meet you.
Very cool.
But now it just happened finally.
Nice.
But my question is, 5 years. What do you think? What do you think this place, your company, would be?
Yeah, we just want to keep furthering as much as we can the volume of what we do, right? Like whatever supply chains we're doing, we want to make them bigger, stronger, more affordable, more convenient, like just better, and then keep innovating as much as we can, right? So it's those two things at the same time, because we want to build those, those big, how do we make coffee capsule recycling bigger or light bulb recycling bigger? Because that's the real engine that drives good revenue and profit. And then the profit is what we deploy into innovation. Like Loop, for example, is negative $50 million today. right? Like that's the cost of that innovation, and it's going to be a while before that recovers, and that's all paid for by the recycling business. So it's the more we can grow our base, and that's why acquisitions, and we don't acquire anything that's innovative. I mean, sorry, I mean anything that's like on an innovation arc where it's in the red and it's going to be years before it gets through. It's got to be like things that are almost like annuities, like high quality P&Ls that immediately are paying profit at a really good ratio, because that is then what we can invest into. How do we push, as far as possible, right? And for me, like the pinnacle of waste is really in the reuse space. So with Loop, right now we're focused on it's not on the slide here, but what you've seen as fast-moving consumer goods, your home care. I just put an image so it correlates to what I'm talking about. But here's a Loop shelf, like, your grocery store stuff, packaged stuff. Once that's really strong and established in multiple markets, then it's about what are the next layers, like fast food, like QSR, and these different areas, like all the waste we have in front of us. And then it's about how far can reuse really go? Can we, move it into textile? Can we move it into different? That's where the innovation really, sort of comes up. And so it's all about, for every sort of pound of meat we can put on the base, we can then do something exciting in the innovation side where the payoff may be very far down the line. That's the challenge with innovation. It's like the payoff is years later, right? And the bigger the innovation, I think the more the payoff generally moves out, right? That may be a bigger payoff, but you have to bridge that gap with cash, right? And so that's sort of the way we try to move. That's why for us, growing the B2B side of our business has been very important, because again, that really adds a lot of sort of, weight to the overall, P&L, if you will. Yeah.
You said that in France, the reason it worked was in big part because of the regulatory
Correct.
environment,
Yes.
because of subsidies.
Yes.
Is there something that other countries can do to get to that place where this could become a global standard rather than the global standard we have?
So it's so interesting because it depends when you would have asked me this question in the past 6 months, right? It's a very evolving answer. If you asked 6 months ago, I would have said regulation, both carrots and sticks, like subsidies and mandates, because France has both. Mm-hmm. Retailers are mandated to bring in reuse by 2027 at a certain percentage of their floor space, and brands are and then they're subsidized, on the work. I would have said that's mandatory, right? But based on the breakthrough that we've been able to achieve on how do we enable existing packaging to become reusable with no change, it can actually, we now have downgraded the regulatory from mandatory to really important, which is a really meaningful downgrade, right? That means that like a country like the UK, which is what you're going to see come on board next, which has no regulations, it will function. Now, if there was regs, would it help? I mean, absolutely, but it can work in a free market environment without the regs. With this approach of, you got to make it as much a non-event as possible. Like the mantra in Loop is, how do you make reuse feel like disposability, but especially to the commercial actors, right? Like the brands, the retailers, and yes, the consumer. The consumer is not really the issue, it's the commercial actors that you really got to move. So that will be a grand experiment for us in the UK, because the UK doesn't have the regs yet, but it has the appetite. And that can then, if that works, that can be transposed generally anywhere, I would say. So that's what we're really excited to validate over the next, next little bit. Yeah.
Building on, I don't know what the economics are, but when you guys went down the carbon markets path,
Yes.
when you analyzed that, like, could you have increase, so like when you go downstream of just the glass bottles to the plastics, so on and so forth,
Yes.
do they become more viable when you actually include carbon markets? And
Well, like carbon offsets and things?
Yeah.
It's so fascinating you say that. So this market used to be very strong, and it just cratered, right? So we did go through, so you can get in our world plastic credits, and you can get carbon credits, right? That are like accredited and tradable. And we went through it, and we have not been able to monetize them. So, and that just, it's the timing. If this was 10 years ago, they would have been totally sold and no problem. But with where we are with the political sort of environment, many companies have stopped accounting for carbon. They don't care. These markets have just imploded, and even more so plastic credits. Now, I hope it'll come back, but right now all of this is fueled without any form of credit income of any kind. Now, again, I really hope it shifts, because it's really unfortunate, because this market got really well established, all this work on it, and it just, under this sort of environment, it's not, there's no movement on it, unfortunately. But it would only help. Right? if it was
Well,
there.
it would change the economics, right?
It would benefit it, sure.
Well, I mean, you can, depending on what the economics become, you can almost give it back to the producers for free, right?
Yeah, I think the big in reusable versus disposable, what are the sort of key economic benefits, right? So one benefit is there's no eco taxes on the package. Disposable packages have in many countries EPR, extended producer responsibility obligations on them. That disappears in reuse, so you are tax exempt there. Here in the US, you have that tax in like Oregon, Maine, California, not nationwide, but state by state. The next is that the package moves from a cog to an asset, so you depreciate it over the number of uses. Reuse, though, does have the added cost of sorting and cleaning, which disposable doesn't. Right? That's the one negative on reuse, is you got to take it, clean it, that's cost. Then you have this very big vector of profit on deposit loss, right? So every bottle not returned, you keep the deposit. That's a very important profit center. And then the final is any form of other monetization, like carbon credits or plastic credits that you could get, right? And right now we're able to make it economically better without yet implementing the carbon or plastic credits. And if those came, it would only be extra tailwind. Yeah.
Allison.
Every aspect of your business is innovative. The model, the approach, like every aspect of it. How does that manifest internally? How do you kind of fuel that with your team, your processes?
Yeah, it's a good question. Certainly, so one major thesis why I think you say that is we only try to do, like ours, where we like to play is where there's not others. That by definition makes it innovative, right? Because other people haven't done it, but it's also nice because you don't have 10 competitors breathing down your neck. You can, you can fall over, stumble, figure yourself, you know what I mean? You get all this extra benefit when the room is not crowded. And the beautiful thing about garbage is no one touches the garbage industry. It is like so fiercely repulsive. Like I give this standing lecture to the inbound class of NYU for now almost 20 years. And it's always like 1,000 kids. And I kid you not, I always ask them, like, who here dreams of being in the garbage industry? Not once ever in 20 years has a hand gone up. You ask any other industry, you're gonna get hands, right? So garbage is great for lack of innovation and so, for playing there. So that part, I think, is manifested because of the way we play. And then we're also very big on understanding why the problem doesn't exist, like getting into the theory of it before we deploy the solution to it, right? I'll give you an example of this that's very simple, right? If in our recycling business, if you ask someone on the street, can I ask you, why is this not recyclable, but that aluminum Sprite can recyclable? What would be your answer to that?
I would guess either the composition or the way it gets the garbage.
Is it fair to say then it's that one can be and this one can't be, something like that?
Sure.
Right. And that's the answer. That's like what you would get. One can be, one cannot be. So the solution to an answer like that would be I have to invent the solution. I have to sort of create the solution, some technology to collect this and process it. It turns out if you actually dive into it, it has nothing to do with it. The reason that's recyclable because it's profitable to recycle. The aluminum has value. And the cost of collecting it and melting it down is less than the value of the aluminum. This can be recycled. There's nothing special. It just costs more to collect this and process it than the results are worth. So it turns out it's just an economic issue. So if you see what I mean, you take that step back and then when you've solved that, you realize all you have to do is find someone who's willing to pay the bill to recycle this. And who could it be? It could be like a Starbucks. It could be whose logo is on it. It could be the office who might buy these. Lots of stakeholders might pay to have that cup recycled. That is the essence of how we innovate, right? We sort of try to understand the problem. We try to play where people don't. Garbage is very conducive to that. But everything else around it is like proper normal systems. Because if the way we did HR was innovative and legal, people's heads would explode. You couldn't bring people in. Onboarding would be so difficult. And so internally, it's very structured and normalized in that way, right? Sure, we've created some fun sort of internal learnings, like a very neat one. We really believe deeply in a 3-to-1 ratio on anything we test. If it's salespeople, all salespeople are held to a 3. I'll explain what I mean by 3-to-1 ratio, but like a 3-to-1 ratio, or all marketing deployments are always held to a 3-to-1 ratio. That's been this really golden rule for us. So and that's, I think, something we invented internally. The 3-to-1 ratio basically says if you're a salesperson, we compare as a ratio your cost to us, which is your salary, but also multiplied by about 1.25, depending on the country. In France, it's like 1.3, US it might be 1.2. What you multiply by is the carrying cost of the person, their desk, their office, HR, what I mean? It's not salary dollar, it's a little bit more than salary dollar. And then we compare that to the profit they bring in, not the revenue, but the profit. And if you are at a 2-to-1, so if for every dollar you cost us, you're bringing in 2 profit dollars, that is actually about break even. The organization is not actually making more money, because remember, other people have to serve that profit as well, right? And make it go around. At a 3-to-1, you're an earner, you're like contributing. So it's a golden ratio. If you're a salesperson, you're below 3-to-1, your job is not going to be there that long. If you're above 3-to-1, then great, and off you go. And the more you're above it, the more you're promoted and you grow, right? Same with marketing, right? If we do marketing that we can measure, it's always in that ratio of 3-to-1 for same similar reason. So those things we invent a couple of those things, but we try to stay as traditional internally, because then you need that structure to maintain the innovation, I think. Mm-hmm. If everything is too all over the place, it becomes, it's just very hard for people to grasp, Yeah.
Just
You mentioned mergers and acquisitions,
Yes.
about 5x EBITDA.
Yes.
But you've also said that you like to play where others aren't playing.
Yes.
So are there others in the ring bidding for the same companies that you're trying to buy out?
Yeah.
And you mentioned a lot of almost intangibles, whether it's permits or things like that.
Yes.
So you're paying 5x premium for permits and the shop that's already set up.
Yeah, so what I would say, it's a very good question. So if we look at like M&A, what we've looked at is 3 categories of companies. One is other waste innovators. The problem there is there's next to none, and most of them are low quality, which I define as not profitable. And we don't want to buy red, right? We only want to invest in purchasing profit, right? Like it's got to pay back. If we're going to invest, we're going to invest in our own ideas, and go. So there's very little in that what you would call direct competitor space, because there's very few, and again, most of them are not yet strong from a profitability point of view. Then you have what we would call sort of indirect waste innovators, and the same issue exists there. So people who are not doing things like we do, but people who are doing other very interesting waste innovations, but again, same problem, very few, because waste is uninnovative as an industry. It's actually the least innovative industry per dollar of revenue it enjoys, just to put that into perspective. There's nothing less innovative than waste. So there's very little there. What we look at, which may seem counter to the point I said on we do what others don't, are really high quality, meaning profitable, recycling businesses that focus on real specialty waste streams. Now there might be other people who do it, but when we buy them, if you're a light bulb recycler in Connecticut, that's the company we just bought a few days ago, the moment you join into TerraCycle, you're not just a light bulb recycler in Connecticut, now you are a company that offers light bulb recycling and 1,000 other recycling services to the same client base. So suddenly you are no longer the same as what you were before. Now, every industry has different, sort of EBITDA ratios. In this space, about a 5 plus minus 1 is, on EBITDA. So again, that's on closer to profit than revenue. It'd be about 1 times revenue, right? To do the revenue version. There would be other people competing, right? But they would be traditional roll-ups, right? In that space. We bring, we try not to destroy the company, we keep the people, and then we make it much more exciting. So the founders, if it's apples to apples, they like going with us more. Then, we bring in those operational efficiencies, makes the 5 a 4, and then when we bring in the revenue, the basket size with all these extra services they can offer, it makes the 4 a 3, maybe even a little less, but that's now almost like a 35-40% return on capital, right? Which is great. We do that all day long, And the reason the specialty ones are great is it brings capability in the really regulated area, where you need permitted vehicles and permitted buildings and those sort of things, which it allows us to accelerate our infrastructure faster than if we just said, let's do it ourselves.
When you say there's an abundance of companies, but you don't have enough money to purchase them, or the flip, or somewhere in the middle?
Today, we're still not a mega company, right? 100 million is still a relatively small organization. I would say that there are more than we can go out there for. So there's an abundance of choice. That allows us to be very choosy, So we'd have to be 10 times bigger to say that we are constrained on choice. So no, there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of different space. It could be white waste, which is like refrigerators and appliances. It could be clothing. It could be anything. I mean, clothing maybe less so, but like things that require this, like it's a difficult to get in starting point. Yeah, that's what we like. It's like where they have sort of there's a high moat to get in. Not through patents, but through process. That they have to navigate. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to give Rich maybe, we're running almost out of time. Rich, why don't you ask the last question?
Are you mostly US based? How have you structured a kind of around the world?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. So this is our geography today. You'll notice basically Asia, Europe, North America. We're 55% revenues US, and then 45 abroad. I think one of the interesting things you'll notice is it's mostly rich countries because wealthy countries can self-finance waste. Thailand, you'll notice in blue, there we operate as a nonprofit. So we have sort of two planets, if you will, emerging markets that need external funding for this because garbage is on the lowest. It's after you've solved education, roads, safety, health. It's at the bottom, right? So you need external funding there, and also the challenge, right, is put into perspective. When we started, we had a debate: should we be a nonprofit or a for-profit? And there was voices pushing us each way. Thank God we went for-profit. For every $1,000 invested into for-profits, $1 is donated to nonprofits. It's 1,000 to 1, and now it's even worse, right? With all the funding having gone away. It's really tough. So we're very proud that it's $1 million a year budget for the foundation, and it's able to make it. I mean, that's a big lift, but it's so hard to scale. It's why you see less blue, on this versus green. Outside that, we have our normal things. We have regional offices in all these places. Normal sort of that goes to your innovation question. All the back office, everything is a normal small global company. Like with that normal process you would expect. Right? There's nothing super special about how we structure Europe versus any other company that's in 20 countries, how they would do it. Right.
Great. This is really a spectacular company. I mean, I'm so impressed every time I hear what you guys are doing. So I want to thank you for coming and sharing.
Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please like it, leave a review, and subscribe. See you soon.